Welcome to the second episode this week of Weekly Hope. It's Kirsten Hagland here and my unofficial co-host, Elsa. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, or maybe it's evening, wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is. We're really, really glad that you're here. So the show, Weekly Hope, is all about bringing you clinicians, experts, advocates, people with their recovery stories, anyone and everyone across the field of eating disorders and mental health, to bring them here to ask them questions, get their insights and wisdom, and offer you a place to be able to share your thoughts, ask questions, and really just be a very, very positive and hopeful place wherever you may be on the recovery journey. So that's what we're all about. If this is your first time joining us, welcome, and we're so glad that you found us. And if you are a returning viewer, guest, friend, thank you so much for joining us back here as well. And please, throughout the show, let us know where you're signing in from. Please post in the comments your name. Again, any thoughts or questions, I'll be able to ask our guests in the middle of the show. Whatever's on your mind or heart, please share it and let us know. It really, really helps for us to be able to shape the conversation in a way that's really meaningful to you. So that's who we are. This is who I am, and it's been so hot here in Germany where I'm broadcasting from recently that Elsa just sleeps all over the house, so she might just fall asleep during this broadcast. A really, really great show. So I'm very excited to welcome our guest. She is the alumni coordinator at Timberline Knolls, and she is an author as well and has a pretty fierce recovery story herself, and she's just a pretty awesome woman. So please welcome Jena Margis. Am I saying your last name right? I'm realizing that I have not.
That was really close. That's actually sometimes how I pronounce it in my head, but it's wrong. So it's actually Margis with a hard G. But
Margis. Okay, I'm so used to calling you Jena Morrow, but you were. It's been a year, second year.
Yeah, we're in year 2.
Year 2 of marriage. So Jena got married, and her new last name is Margis. So Jena Margis to the show. Are you still getting used to that?
Yeah, I actually use both names for like work purposes. So although my husband doesn't like it, whenever he sees my business card with both names, he crosses out the maiden name. So he's still working on acceptance, but it's all good.
Great. And we're going to talk a little bit about
full acceptance
today. So that's you know what else is really cool? I have to give a shout out. Jena, we will talk a little bit about Jena's work at Timberline Knolls and what she does as alumni coordinator, but and a lot of that has to do with social media, but I will just give a shout out. You have to follow Jena on Facebook because she is hilarious. Like, I, without a doubt, always crack up out loud at your posts. You have such a wicked sense of humor. And I really, really love it, because one of my things about the eating disorder community is that sometimes we don't have that great of a sense of humor, or people can't laugh at themselves or whatever, and you just rock at that.
Well, thank you. People tell me that, and I'm always taken aback because I'm like, seriously, it's just my life. Like, that's just kind of the life God has given me, and it happens to be, I guess, pretty funny. So I just live out loud, and if it makes you laugh, then I guess that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it really is. It really is sensational. So be friends with Jena on Facebook. You can see her name up there on the slide and search for her. But she is not only funny, but obviously has a lot of wisdom to offer as well. So Jena, you have a really cool recovery story that you outlined in your book, Hollow. And then there's also an accompanying devotional, I think, right?
Yes, Hope for the Hollow is the second book that accompanies the first one.
Right. So you detail a lot of your story there. And so if people want to hear everything in detail and the full picture, of course, they can read your book. But why don't you tell us a little bit about, from the beginning, let's just start from the very beginning, how your struggle with an eating disorder began.
Okay, so it's interesting because when I hear other people's stories in treatment, so often people don't know exactly where they're started. And I have sort of a unique story in that I can tell you the time and the day when I first had thoughts of body dissatisfaction, which for me was how it started. I also find with a lot of people, it seems like it either starts from the food side or the body side. For me, it was definitely, the body side. So I was about 3 years old, sitting in my mom's car when she picked me up from preschool. I can remember looking down and seeing my legs squish out on the seat, because I was, back in the day, we sat in the front seat of the car. I didn't have a car seat, and I was, my little legs didn't reach the floor, and so your legs squish out. And I remember looking at them and being like horrified, just thinking there was too much of me. And that's at like 3, 4 years old as a preschooler. So it wasn't until years later that I even realized that not everybody has that experience. To me, to have a body was to hate my body. That was just kind of how I always say my brain developed around the eating disorder because those thoughts took root so early. I had an older sister who, from maybe age 6 or so on, began to struggle a little bit with weight. And back at that time, it was sort of an ongoing topic of conversation in our home all the time. And I sort of picked up on this message of like, to be chubby or excessive or something like that was to make your parents worry, to displease somebody, to be a topic of conversation. And I just didn't want that. I wanted to stay under the radar. I also had a mom who was very thin, who didn't like being thin. And so I heard this conversation on both sides. So it was kind of like I was sort of assimilating these messages of like, there's really no happy middle. I never heard talk of healthy necessarily. I just heard talk of not being enough in one direction or another. And I really kind of absorbed that. So fast forward until like, I think it was 11 or so in 5th grade. We were doing gymnastics in gym class, and I, to this day, am the least graceful person in the world. And I think it was you would know this, the pommel horse. Is that the thing with the handles that torture device?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I was doing that, whatever we were supposed to do with it. And I did it and did my graceful dismount, and I sort of like landed with my feet pointing backwards. So something had snapped, and was laid up for like 6 weeks or so in this full leg cast. And I remember the first thing that I heard was this conversation of, oh, make sure that she doesn't get chubby because she's not going to have any activity. And being that I was entering into puberty, and it was like, oh my gosh, like that had been my whole life to that point was like, that's the worst possible fate was to gain weight. And so I remember like designing these calisthenics routines that I would do in my full leg cast and trying to go as many days as I could at that point without food, thinking, well, I probably don't need it since I'm not moving as much. And really at that time, like that's really when things took root as far as, I would say, the obsessive thoughts and the terrified thoughts of how do I know when enough is too much,
Yeah.
So that was 5th grade. And then the next year was 6th grade, which in my district meant that you had to shower in front of your friends in gym class. And yeah,
that is so not cool.
Like now I say that and everyone's like, really? That's so not what happens. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Like that was just part of life. And it was the worst thing ever, for me anyway. So the entire summer before 6th grade started, I was panicking, like, how do I get out of this? Just because I had this belief for whatever reason that there was too much of me. I was not okay. I was not acceptable. I was gross. And so I couldn't quite get out of going to gym class. I tried I think we had it like twice a week. And I remember the class started at 11 a.m. I always remember that. And I would like go to my first 4 periods of the day, whatever it was. And then when it came time for gym class, I would find a bathroom and go hide and put my feet up on the stall. And I got away with that for like a month or so before finally a gym teacher was like, how come this girl's like never in class? And sent someone looking for me, and they found me like in a stall, and I had to tell them I'm not getting naked in front of people. Like that's just not happening. So that triggered enough of a alert that I was sent to a social worker. Started the conversation about how much I hated my body and how much I ate or didn't eat. So that was when I was then referred to a child psychologist who back at the time told my mom, this sort of, I think he labeled it anxiety. He said it was an anxiety disorder, and said she'll grow out of it when she gets a boyfriend. So, no, yeah. That guy's like still practicing in this area too. And I want to write a letter so often. I want to write like a strongly worded letter. But obviously that wasn't exactly the case or the cure. But he figured that and Xanax. And, I had a pass to leave school every day in time or on those 2 days a week, I think it was when we had gym class, I got to leave before that because I was declared like emotionally unstable. And I was like, oh, she just can't handle it. So take her home, let her do the rest of the classes as a home study course, which I did. So basically in my 6th grade year, I got to be like a sick person. That became my identity. It was like, why does she leave every day? Why does her mom pick her up? Which was after about a year or so, I realized not an identity that I wanted. It didn't feel like who I was. And so something happened before I got to seventh grade, and it was like, well, for one thing, I should probably mention I had gotten my period super early. I was like 11, which is not uncommon with eating disorders. And then somehow by like seventh grade, my friends had caught up. And so then in my little brain, I was like, okay, cool. I guess now I can sort of fall in with them. So things I would say went into remission for a few years at that time, until I got to high school and sort of really dove in further to the perfectionist side of things. I was a performer, I was a vocalist, I was, a musician, I was a writer, and everything I did, I had to be the best at. I was never in competition with anyone other than myself, but I was also a really tough competitor with myself. So, and behaviors looked a little bit different at that time, but they were still eating disorder behaviors. It was kind of like when I couldn't perfect things as much as I wanted to, I could still have influence over this one area of my life. I could still be thinner. So, sort of messed around with behaviors, restricting behaviors in high school. And then when I got to college, which again, I think these transition points tend to be sort of sticking points for people.
Absolutely.
And I got to college and was sort of out from under the watchful eye of my mom and my friend's mom and, moms and teachers. And so I was kind of left to my own devices. And that was like, I think I said in my book, like that's the part of the story where you want to cover your eyes because that's where it got pretty ugly pretty fast. So the first 2 months, I think it was, of college, I'd lost like 40 pounds, which put me in a very dangerous place. And was soon asked to basically leave campus because I was a liability. I was passing out while driving, passing out in class. And so found myself at Remuda Ranch, which at the time was, I think, the only treatment center in the nation for eating disorders at the time, residential, I believe, because this was 1996. So, and this was also back in the day when you kind of could stay as long as you needed to. I always look back at that now and I'm like, wow, that was such an opportunity. So I was there for the better part of a year. And sadly wasn't ready to take the tools I was given. Didn't feel like I was done trying to attain whatever it was I was trying to attain. So I learned everything that I could, and we learned a lot of CBT and cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of, we didn't have DBT back in the day, but a lot of different tools that were being applied in the field of eating disorders. And I remember being super interested and being like, this will probably come in handy one day when I want to recover. So I learned everything I could. I took really good notes and kind of filed it away for later. And then for me, later didn't come until my 20s, probably not until after I had my son, actually. And when he was 2, I remember I was going through a divorce, a lot of stress, without even really realizing it, had started restricting again, and then passed out in my mom's kitchen and came to with my 2-year-old crawling on me and trying to wake me up. And he was like holding my eyes open, like trying to wake me up. And I remember thinking like, this is not really an option anymore. I mean, it is, but it's not a good one. Not that it ever was, but in that moment it was like, this is really not something that I have the luxury of just running to. And so really, I would like to say that that's when everything gets rosy again and I realize my priorities. But instead, that's just when the conflict intensified. But it's like I tell clients now, that's not a bad thing. That conflict is absolutely what we need, so that we will realize we value something more than this pursuit of thinness or this pursuit of control or whatever. So, that's when the struggle really started. That's when I actually started working and doing real work, and really trying for not only recovery, but a life. And I always say you can't necessarily have a life without recovery, but you also can't have recovery without a life. So that sort of began this maybe 5 or 7 year quest to figure out what that meant for me. And then soon after that, I wrote a book. And soon after that, I ended up at Timberline Knolls, working, and kind of the rest is history. And here we are. And it's been a while.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I can relate to so many elements of your story, even though obviously every person's experience is so different. But that's one of the reasons why I think it's so powerful to share stories, is that even with the differences, there's so many areas where we all can relate. And so thank you for being open and sharing that. And of course, if you want all the details of Jena's story, pick up a copy of Hollow. And people can find that on Amazon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the best way to order?
Yeah.
Okay.
If on Amazon, it's still under my maiden name. So Jena Morrow, Morrow.
Perfect. And I just want to recognize Sarah's here. Sarah joins us pretty often, and so just want to say hi, Sarah. She says hello. And then also Amy Schaller has been. She says Hollow is a great book. Made me realize I was not the only one who struggled. And
Aww.
yeah, I remember some of the first. Yeah, and Amy is also posted some other comments. So she says, thank you for sharing, Jena. So thank you all. And then Jacqueline actually says, hello, so glad you are with us today, Jena. We love you. And that's very true.
Hi, Jacqueline. I miss you.
So yeah, the other thing you mentioned, which I think I really realized as well, that was a very, very much a catalyst for me, was realizing that I valued or wanted other things more than I wanted my eating disorder, because it becomes such an identity that it's very, very scary to think of leaving it, even if you finally start to see how destructive it is in your life. And even if you get to the place where you don't want to do it anymore, you have to want something else more because it's entrenched. And I had a very similar experience where I was running on a treadmill, and I like very almost passed out and felt very dizzy, and my head was spinning and all these things. And I felt really terrified because I had never felt like my life was in danger up until that point. I thought, yeah, I was 15 or something, and I thought, oh yeah, people don't. It's not going to happen to me. That kind of thought. And so one, I was scared, and then two, just I had this realization that there were so many other things I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to travel. I wanted to get married. I wanted to learn another language. I wanted to help people and save the children and world peace and all of that, So it became very, very clear to me that there were things that I wanted that I could not have while still being enslaved to my eating disorder, that you just couldn't do it. Thank you for talking about that, TK. A lot of people who go through their own recovery journey end up working in the field. Not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them do. Talk to us about your role, because it's really cool. It's not like you're just a clinician. I know you run groups and do a lot of work on campus, but you're also the alumni coordinator. So talk to us a little bit about that job. And I'm sure it's, very stressful, I'm sure, but also in a really unique way, very, very fulfilling as well.
It is. I always say I have the one job on campus where part of my job description doesn't have to include saying goodbye, which is awesome. Sometimes with the boundaries of the treatment world, we need to there's sort of a necessary ending to those therapeutic relationships. And I totally have an out and got around that by getting to stay in touch with the women that we treat. So I love that. So I basically, in a nutshell, my job description is that I get to maintain contact and connection with the women who have been through our program. And that looks different for different people. Sort of the lion's share of what I do is on social media. We have a sort of exclusive secret Facebook group for the women that have been through our program, if they so choose to be part of that. And so I think we've got, I want to say like around 4,000 of our alumni that are in that group. Which is
wow.
Great. So yeah, we're able to maintain this sort of, real-time discussion sometimes about, it's a place for people to go when they're struggling, when they need some, inspiration or kind of a shot in the arm or a reminder of why we're doing what we're doing. But also it's a really cool place where we get to celebrate the milestones that people have. So I've gotten to walk through, now, oh my gosh, I think 10 years maybe with some of these ladies, I've gotten to follow their progress. And some of them I knew when they were angry teenagers, and now they're, moms, and they're getting their master's degrees, and they're moving to other countries, and they're doing incredible things sometimes in the recovery community. A lot of them now are clinicians, or they've just gone on to pursue other goals. And it's been amazing to get to stay in touch and sort of see that. So I have a very rewarding job.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, can you talk about the importance of those friendships and staying open with your community? Because I don't know if you felt this pressure, but I certainly felt this pressure. That once I felt like I was in a really good place in recovery, then I could never talk about anything that was bothering me or a problem, even if it had nothing to do with food or body image. That even the slightest hint of like, oh, anxiety, or I'm stressed about getting this job or getting into this college or whatever, that like, oh no, people are going to think I'm relapsing, or people are going to think whatever. An over concern about what other people are going to think, and then going like this. So talk about the importance of openness and vulnerability, continuing to have that in your life, even if someone doesn't have like an alumni group, for example, like the one that you organize.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we are sort of blessed in having this sort of little bit of a TK bubble, I guess you would say, where we have this, group of people who kind of all get it, which is really helpful. But I think it's also sort of a practicing field sometimes for people to practice how they would like to have relationships, what they would like their relationships to look like kind of in their larger life. And so we practice authenticity, which, for a lot of people, I think it's a little bit of a shocker to get out of their treatment bubble and realize that, wow, even though we often say, like my worst day in recovery is better than my best day in my disease, at the same time, these days in recovery, it's still real life. And so you're still going to have ups and downs, and you're still going to have emotions, which is good.
Darn it.
We like those. Those are good for us. Even the quote unquote negative ones,
Yeah.
which really, emotions are neither good nor bad. They just are what they are. But, I think it was Anne Lamott, who's like one of my favorite writers. And she has this quote that says, if you are a human being, you are entitled to the full range of emotion. It comes with the package. And so it's kind of an arena where people get to practice that, and they can come on and be like, I'm having a case of the screw-its, and I just don't even want to do this today. Someone please remind me that tomorrow's going to be better. And all of a sudden there'll be, tens and 20 and 50 people getting on and, saying, I've so been there, hang on. It does get brighter. It's still worth it. We all have these days, and which is awesome because, and I will sometimes hop in, I'm not as active sometimes in discussion as I once was in the beginning, because now the community has such a life of its own that I can kind of sit back and watch as the conversation unfolds. I don't need to kind of drive it to the extent that I once did. But I can relate to these conversations. I mean, I've been working in this field for 10 years, but I'm still a woman in recovery. And so I also love being able to have permission to be authentic about that.
Yeah, and I will say, I think one of the reasons why people do feel so comfortable in that setting, probably sharing their own heart and then responding, and it's growing, is because you yourself are just really, really real. And having someone like you at the forefront of something like that, I mean, it's like model the behavior. It's like a riff on the famous quote, "Be the change you want to see in the world," but model the behavior you want to encourage in others. And you are so authentic, and that's why you're also so funny, for example, on your Facebook page. But you are just really, really real. And let's jump to a couple topics that you mentioned that you're really passionate about, and I think are very, very relatable for those who might be struggling, or a loved one who might be supporting someone who is. The first one is this issue of self-compassion. Self-compassion and not self-care. So I'm wondering first if there's a difference between those two. And then second, of course, what is self-compassion? How do we do it? Do we deserve it? Which of course the answer is yes.
So compassion has become over the years one of my favorite words. And I really love when this topic comes up in groups, because I'm a word nerd. I'm a reader. I'm a writer. I love words. I get super excited about them. It's ridiculous. And so I remember doing sort of like a word study on the word compassion at one time. It came up in a group actually. And I think it was a group I was leading of adolescents years ago. I don't even know how long ago now. And one of the girls, who I think was like 12 years old, she was just as cute as she could be. And she was like, well, I don't like the word compassion because it just means pity. And I don't want people to pity me. And I was kind of like, whoa, let's back that train up and look at that. And so we looked at sort of the difference of compassion and pity. And what that led us to was breaking apart the word compassion and looking at it. So if we break out compassion, C-O-M, the prefix meaning with, and then the word passion essentially meaning suffering. And so it literally means to suffer with or to suffer alongside. And so we kind of broke that down, and a lot of them didn't like the word suffer. It seemed like a victim type of word. And so we looked a little deeper into that. And really what that means is we kind of, and this was all in this one powerful group. We talked about what would it mean to come alongside yourself and suffer alongside yourself. And what is inherent to that, I think, is making room for and making allowance for our pain rather than apologizing for it, rather than excusing it, rather than covering it up, rather than stuffing it, all the things that in many cases have led us to eating disorder behaviors. And to me, it's very honoring. So we can't deny the fact that we have pain of whatever sort. If we didn't, we wouldn't have developed an eating disorder to cope with it. But to me, self-compassion means making space for the pain that I have, acknowledging it, honoring it, sometimes sitting amidst all the broken pieces of my life and like holding them in my hands and being like, help, what do I do with these? But it's actually such a gentle word, I think. And we're so often, I think, especially people who struggle with eating disorders, just because of sort of the, not to pigeonhole, but just sort of the general makeup and constitution of our character, tend to be pretty good at having compassion for others, having mercy on others, being gentle with others, and then we just kind of tend to suck at doing it with ourselves. So,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Am I alone in that?
Oh, no, I was agreeing with you. I was giving you a hallelujah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, and I mean, so often we see that in treatment where people are just, sometimes a little out of balance with it, tend to be caregivers and wanting to take care of others and wanting to put others above themselves, which can be, almost honorable traits. But when we do those things to the detriment of our own care, it's destructive. So that's part of, I think, the really rewarding part of coming alongside those in treatment is teaching them. And sometimes that means modeling for them how to come alongside ourselves and sort of honor the pain that maybe our, not to get into like inner child work, but that our little girl has. Like I love the quote that we're all the ages we've ever been. So like the 3-year-old me is still inside of there, and the 6-year-old me is still inside of there, and the angsty teenager is still in there, And so sometimes we go back to those places of pain, come alongside ourselves almost at that age or that state. And it's amazing what can come out of that. So, and I think that's an evolving process. I think it looks different throughout the years. I imagine in middle age and beyond, we have other needs of self-compassion. So it's one of those things where I don't think we necessarily stop learning and growing.
Yeah. Can you talk about some ways that, because I know that I have my kind of go-to self and I guess, or where I can exercise self-compassion, meaning like things that I do, places I go, things that I do where I can reflect and process and suffer with myself, give myself self-compassion. I have my go-to things: walks in nature, music. This is going to sound really strange, but like reading historical, like books, articles, or watching historical documentaries. I know that sounds so wacky.
No, I've noticed that about you. I've totally noticed that about you.
I'm like a huge history reader, and for some reason learning new things about history and exploring the time period and the people and what they experienced for me is a way of like getting in touch with other people's humanity. And I feel like the sense of then like collective compassion, like, oh, look at all the brokenness of the world throughout history, and yet all of us humans are in this together. And like, it's this weird, I don't know. But it works for me. Yeah. So those are kind of some tools. And then, I pray and meditate in nature and music, yoga, all that stuff. So what are some things that you do that help facilitate the exercise of self-compassion for you, for example?
For me, like I said, I'm a word girl. So, writing has always been really, really, really huge. And it wasn't until, I don't know, 10 years ago or so that I realized, like, why do I do that? Why do I obsessively journal? Like, I wasn't even calling it that. It was just, I've always had to write down my thoughts. And then I read a quote by Flannery O'Connor that said, I don't know what I think until I read what I write. And I was like, that is so me. Like, I can have a thought, but my thoughts go.
Wait. Pause, Jena. Say that again, because you broke up just a little bit when you were saying it. And then also I want to take it and put it on the screen.
Oh, sure. So it was a quote by Flannery O'Connor, writer, and it's I don't know what I think until I read what I write. So that's very much true for me, and I think it's because for one thing, I have ADD, so my thoughts go really, really, really quickly, and also I am pretty empathic, and I'm a feeler by nature. For those of you psych nerds out there, I'm an INFJ, which means I feel things 110% always. Are you also?
Yes, I am.
What? High five.
Yes, I'm an INFJ too, and it's like one of the rarest.
It's
Actually, mine
the
is bird
rarest.
type.
We're very weird birds. Let's get
We're
a shout out
very
from all the INFJs. They're all gonna like start typing in. Um,
I know.
yeah, it's so funny because I'm always like, we're like the rarest type. Why do I meet them all? And I think it's because we just gravitate toward one another. But it means that, if you
Yeah,
like the word, that we're empaths and we do feel things very strongly. And so I need an outlet for that. And I also need to know what it is that I'm feeling. And for me, writing helps me figure out kind of where I am, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, because otherwise I just get flooded. And I'll just be like, I don't know, it's just everything's wrong. And so for me, it's a discipline, but also it's a necessity, I think, to journal so that I can realize, oh, this is where I am, and this is why that hurts, and that's probably legit. And maybe, because otherwise I just don't even know. I wouldn't even necessarily be able to identify my emotions, because sometimes it's just like all the feels all the time. So for me, journaling is huge. And I know some of the ladies that I've worked with are like, absolutely not. It was, I always joke, my best friend, it takes her like 3 years to fill up a journal. And I'm like, dude, give me like a week and I need a new one. So we're all
yeah,
totally different. I'm not saying my way is the only way. For some people, music is huge. I mean, it's like those are the people that have like one earbud in at all times, no matter what, because that speaks to their soul, and it calms them. It somehow, I think, regulates the central nervous system for some people, if that's really what it takes. So we all kind of find our own things that, in a way, are this is like so cheesy, but I actually kind of love it. Ways of sort of hugging ourselves throughout the day.
yeah. Oh no, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Can you, and also, I just thought of this. I think not only are sometimes this personality type better at showing compassion to others, not so good at showing it ourselves, but also kind of like, oh, I'm stronger than that. I don't need that, or that weakness. I'm strong. I can push through. Or the feeling that this is, I don't know, too soft or too selfish. Can you help break down that myth a little bit? Because I remember hearing that voice, and I'm sure a lot of people do if they're in recovery as well.
I think probably the best way to sort of define that, I would call it a lie that we believe, is just I'm too much of whatever. I'm too sensitive. I'm too, which many times we've been told that by people in our lives, that we're too sensitive. We just need to not feel so much, basically. And I think embracing kind of who we are and learning about ourselves too, which is one of my favorite things to do with people in sort of the treatment process, is rediscover who they are, who they've always been, and who their eating disorder and no other experience can really change, because our personality is, I mean, that's like gift that's given to us. And so it's really fun to discover who you were created to be and then to embrace that. And so actually for me, it was years ago when I read the book, Susan Cain's book, Quiet, which is basically about what it is to be an introvert in a rather extroverted world, or at least in a world that very much celebrates extroversion. And I remember reading that going, oh my gosh, I'm not weird. I mean, I am, but I'm supposed to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that was like, I think learning about who we are and how we've been wired up is so empowering, because at least for me, it gives me permission to be myself without apology. And every single personality type, or every individual has inherent strengths and weaknesses. That's just how it is. But when we learn how to work with those strengths and weaknesses rather than fighting against them, it gives us permission to be ourselves. And then we stop, I think, over time, we stop those tapes of I'm too much, I'm too this, I'm too that, I should be different.
Yeah, so good. So jumping over to the other issue, and it actually kind of weaves in very well with this, is body love versus body acceptance. And you talked to us a little bit about acceptance there.
Yeah.
There is a lot of talk about body love, body positivity, love your body. I remember hearing that all the time throughout my own treatment process. Is there something we're not seeing though? Is it too hard to ask someone who struggled with an eating disorder to ask them to love their body?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That's exactly been my frustration. And it's hard sometimes to put words to this because it's almost a controversial, like, no thing to say in the treatment world. But I really feel, and this is after working with probably over 1,000 women and girls now with eating disorders, more than that, I'm sure, but I mean, working closely with that many. Um, I think that it's a little overzealous of us to put that out there as not necessarily an expectation, but let's face it, people with eating disorders are going to see it as an expectation because we have this tendency to want to do things well and do things perfectly, and then that tends to spill over into recovery. I want to do recovery perfectly. And I can remember being in treatment myself at 19 and having speakers come in and the whole body love movement. And I remember thinking like, I can't do that, And so it just felt like sort of a setup for failure. And it wasn't until probably just in the last several years, it was probably actually an experience of working with others in treatment that we started talking more about, well, what would it look like to just come to a place of body acceptance first? Not to say that body love isn't a possibility at some point, but even not, I don't even necessarily like the term body love because then that's talking about one dimension of who I am as a person. None of us are just a body. Thank God, because entropy is real. Our bodies age, our bodies change. I could be disfigured in a car accident tomorrow. Am I no longer me if that happens? Well, no, thank God, because we're more than a body. So we're triune type people. We have, regardless of where you fall in sort of a belief spectrum, we're spirit, soul, body. I think we can usually agree on that, even scientifically. So self-love, I think, is a little rounder a concept than just body love. But I think before we can get there, we have to start looking at acceptance. So I'll be real with like everyone out there right now. I'm 41 years old. I don't love everything about my body. I just don't. Like,
which is totally normal, and I don't either. And I'm a happily recovered person, and yeah, there's still things I don't like about my body or love.
Yeah. So if I thought that I had to get to a place of loving it all the time, then what would that mean? That like what I can't define myself as a person in recovery? Well, thank God that's not necessarily the standard because I'd like to think that I'm working it daily now. And some days that looks different than other days. But I would say for the most part, on a good day, I can be in a place of self-acceptance. On a bad day, not so much. And that's when I kind of, like we talked about earlier, will reach out to people and be like, hey, remind me why I'm fighting for this. Like, remind me of what I know. Because right now I forgot it all. Like, I forgot everything I ever learned. Just remind me what I know. And then that brings me back to a place of self-acceptance. So I'm not in a place of body love. Sorry about it. I'm not. I hope that doesn't mean that I'm like disappointing the world, but I'm just not.
No, definitely not. No, and I think it's also part of the conversation about would we be loving our bodies for, because this is where I do think that body love is possible. Is the requirement to love my body meaning I have to love the shape of it, the size of it, the attractiveness of it, the perkiness of it, or I can learn to love what my body can do for me. I mean, I'm sure you're going through a process right now of wonder and amazement at what your body can do. I know that when I recovered from 2 injuries over the past, in the past 5 years, one being a broken ankle, the other being just a really bad accident with my back, and going from a place of being completely on the floor, not able to move, and thinking, am I never going to be able to jog through the forest again? To being in a place where I can jog through the forest, I can ride my bike, I can walk happily in heels if necessary, and going, wow, like I really love what my body did, that it healed itself, that I'm able to now, my legs are able to carry me on a walk through the forest. I mean, that is unbelievable if you stop to think about it for a while. It's something that I used to say in my flywheel classes when I would teach, is that, you just rode hard for 45 minutes in here, this class, and you're able to now stretch and go out into the world and walk on the street. Like, think of how many people out there are disabled, have a chronic illness, have had an injury, and they can't do this. Like, be thankful for your body. And in that way, I can love my body, but that doesn't mean I have to love its curves or non-curves every single day when I wake up.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we, as we discipline ourselves sometimes to just think differently about it, I mean, we're the worst, we're the guiltiest parties when it comes to objectification of the body. We do that to ourselves all the time. It's almost like we look at our bodies as this thing to be honed or, perfected or changed or molded or shaped or whatever. When really, if we look at the function of our body, it's a way for us to be expressive to the world. It's the vessel that carries us, the essence of who we are, into the world and allows us to then express who we are to the world. So if I didn't have my body, I mean, I'm an awesome hugger. I would not be able to hug people, and I love hugs, and I wouldn't be able to receive them. So I mean, even just that alone, it's like, well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm a writer. I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, now we have technology that's awesome, but for the most part, all those other years, if I couldn't hold a pencil, I wouldn't have known what I was thinking because I wouldn't have been able to write it down. So
Yeah.
I think you're really onto something there with kind of like looking at the functionality of what are different, and sometimes even breaking it down to body parts, what they allow us to do. That's one of the things that we've done in body image groups is those body parts that sometimes hold traumatic memory or that are, just sort of sticking points for us, like looking at the functionality of them and how they've served us and how they've served others. It changes the conversation. And I think that needs to be an ongoingly changing conversation.
Yeah. One more piece I want to add to this conversation about acceptance is how do you accept yourself when because what other people think of us is a huge part of the eating disorder struggle. It's a huge, huge part of it, wherever you are on this spectrum, whatever you struggle with. But it's also just holds people back in life in general. And overly ruminating on the opinions of others. And if other people don't accept us, especially if you're someone in a recovered body at your set weight and you're trying to practice accepting yourself and other people don't, if people out there are listening to this, what encouragement can you give them? Because I think that's when it's hardest. It's like you can practice acceptance when you wake up in the morning and it's just you like jamming out to your favorite music in the morning, unless you're not a morning person, in which case, ignore that comment.
Noon, jamming out to your music, yeah.
Yeah, where whatever time. But then you go to work or then you go to whatever hostile environment and people are not accepting at all.
And that's a sad reality, I think, of the world that we live in. And I especially think of, people who are in sometimes these almost cultures that are just breeding grounds for things like eating disorders. So, I mean, obviously, well, you would know, I'm speaking to the dancers. I'm speaking to, the people who are in so many of the professions where image is so important. But not even necessarily that. I sat yesterday with somebody who told me a horrific story of just the expectation that her husband had had on her for years to basically be a trophy wife. And so I think that those people are going to be out there. That's kind of like a sad reality of the world that we live in, which is why it's so important to intentionally surround ourselves with the other half, with the other people, the people who see us and know us and appreciate us for who we are, for, like I said earlier, the whole of us, not just what our outward expression of ourselves looks like. And even if that's only one person, even if that's only your spouse or your best friend, or in some cases, your therapist in the beginning, until you learn how to choose other people who are good for you, many times the therapeutic relationship, especially if it's a long-term one, becomes a practicing relationship to learn how you want to be treated, because we teach other people how to treat us by what we allow.
Ooh, say that again. That was really good.
And so we teach other people essentially how to treat us by what we allow. If someone treats us poorly and talks to us poorly and we don't challenge that or stand up to for ourselves, they're going to continue to do it. And I think that's a very long-term process of learning what we wish to allow and not to allow. And then I think for a lot of us, we have to practice with a therapist or a sponsor or a best friend or someone like that until we learn how to do it with others and to hold others to a standard, usually the standard to which we hold ourselves with how we treat other people. Sometimes the golden rule doesn't necessarily get reciprocated out of necessity. We have to sort of force it a little bit. And and
Yeah.
if it doesn't, then we learn those are people that we don't want in our lives. So, but I think that's like something for the women who are like 50 and 60 and beyond who have really kind of arrived. Those are the people I consider to have arrived, the ones who really know what they will allow and not. I'm still working on that, but I have people
Yeah.
who model it for me, and I love it.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And because you think too, especially if people have trauma as a part of their recovery journey, where someone has committed an abuse against them, it's okay to shut those people out of your life, to not engage with those people anymore. There's only some people, and I think that's a part of the discernment too, is being able to discern who will be open to hear how you want to be treated, what is okay, what is not, and who's not, and just doesn't deserve your time or energy anymore.
Right. And then the cool thing about that is once we're able to do that and sort of make that discerning decision, then we can more easily see when we've joined the abusers in abusing ourselves. And then that's kind of the next level.
Ah, that's so good.
Yeah. Like, okay, if it wasn't okay for them and I shut that person out of my life, then why am I allowing this inner bitch to beat me up? Like, get out.
Yeah. Amen. I totally agree. I just want to say, Amy also says it's so important for those in recovery to know there is hope. Both of your stories are inspirational and filled with hope, even in the struggle, and that's so true. Thanks, Amy, for sharing that as well. And Nikki, our friend Nikki DeVos says, love this. Thanks, Nikki, for signing in and for watching. So much great stuff. Jena, you rock. Thank you very much for being open and for sharing your story. And your lit. There are always parts that I hear that are new. Sarah Willis, she says, preach, Jena.
Hi, girl.
Yay. Yes, indeed. You have lots and lots of fans. But each time I hear bits and pieces of your story, I learn something new and just have even more admiration for you. So thank you so much.
Twice.
And again, the book is Hollow. I'm just going to put this up on the screen on Amazon. And so that's the book, Hollow. You can buy it on Amazon. Also, the accompanying devotional, Hope for the Hollow. That's the second book as well. And Jena, any last parting words that you can give or hope that you can give to someone who might be really, really struggling out there right now and watching this?
There's nothing really all that special. Don't take any offense to this, Kristen, but there's really nothing all that special about Kristen or myself. And the fact that we are able to be in a place where we are today doesn't mean that we are any cooler than you or have any more capacity to recover than you do. So I think how we both got to where we are is one day at a time. And hopefully the next time I'm on this little show, I'll be in a better place even than I'm in today. So that's the hope, is that we're constantly growing, constantly getting closer to who we were always meant to be. So stay in the fight. It's worth it.
Awesome. Perfect ending note. Thank you, Jena, so much. Jena Morrow, author of Hollow and Hope for the Hollow, alumni coordinator at Timberline Knolls Residential Treatment Center outside Chicago and Illinois. And are you joining us from Chicago, actually, or from that area?
Yeah, that little area right there. Yep.
Nice. Awesome. Cool. Well, we're going to say goodbye to Jena, and I'm going to give a last parting word to our folks watching. So thank you, Jena, so much for joining us. You're awesome.
Thank you.
So Jena is just the coolest. I'm so glad that she joined us. We are going to say goodbye until next week. We've got Weekly Hope on Wednesday. We're going to be talking about interventions and co-occurring disorders with eating disorders. But just my day is made. I really love the opportunity to do this show and hear from incredible people. And I always leave feeling so inspired. And also thank you guys so much for watching and for saying hello and for encouraging us as well. So wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful, beautiful, blessed rest of your week. Elsa says ciao. Stay cool wherever you are. Have a wonderful and lovely day. And we will see you back here next week. All right, thanks for watching Weekly Hope, guys. We'll see you soon. Ciao.